Last season was the first time I used micro-diameter arrows with my compound. The benefits are supposed to be reduced wind drag and increased penetration. The downsides tend to revolve around durability and modified insert systems to adapt to standard threaded broadheads. Even though I never had any issues with standard-sized arrows, I'd wanted to try out micro-diameters for quite some time. I decided to go with the gold tip pierced platinum arrows because I've had great experiences with gold tip in the past. In 300 spine, they're 9.1 grains per inch, 240 OD, and 166 ID with a half grain weight tolerance and a 2,500 straightness tolerance. They come with a 2.6 grain knock collar, and on the front end there's a 2-component system. A 19.5 grain insert fits into the shaft, and then a 24 grain outsert goes over the top, overlapping both the insert and the arrow. This system allows the arrows to be used with any standard threaded broadhead. In the past, I've always bought cheaper arrows in the plus or minus 6,000 straightness tolerance range, which required me to spin test full-length arrows and cut to length by trimming whichever end of the shaft showed more wobble. Since these arrows came with a much tighter straightness tolerance out of the box, I just decided to cut them off from the same end. Now, mathematically speaking, the wind drift difference is something we know is there. There's a measurable difference in the surface area that a crosswind can act upon to push the arrow off course. In general, my group sizes are close enough to what they've always been that I don't know if there's a significant difference from similar straightness standard arrows in a well-tuned bow. What's more interesting from a hunter's perspective is whether or not there's a penetration benefit and how durable the arrows are. While I used my trad bow mainly last fall, I did use my compound for all the city-controlled hunts, and for reference it has about 85 foot-pounds of kinetic energy at my draw length and weight. During those hunts, I shot 3 does. The first was a 12-yard shot. It was a complete pass-through with no damage to the arrow. I was using a lighted knock, however, which was destroyed. Since the arrow is small diameter, the knock manufacturer widened up the plastic outside of the arrow to increase strength. However, on this first deer I shot, the knock sheared off right at the end of the arrow. I imagine the arrow drove a small enough hole through a rib that the knock simply couldn't fit through and broke. The second deer I shot was at about 25 yards. This time I had a spine hit and followed up with a quick second arrow. What was interesting about the spine hit, and I've never seen this before, was that the arrow actually penetrated all the way up to the veins. Furthermore, I could slide the arrow back out to the broadhead relatively easily. I think what happened here was that going through heavy bone, the broadhead set the size of the hole. And since the arrow shaft is smaller than the broadhead, there is very little resistance to further penetration. This leads me to believe that the smaller diameter arrows may indeed have a noticeable increase in penetration if bone is hit. With any arrow passing through soft tissue, friction is reduced because the tension of the tissue is released and there's lubrication. With bone, however, you don't get that same effect, and friction on the arrow shaft is a big deal. With the small diameter arrow, that friction seems to be reduced to whatever the broadhead is still cutting after it passed through the bone. The third deer was shot at 6 yards. The arrow passed through the lungs and directly through the center of the opposite leg bone below the shoulder. Just like the first deer, the shot was a complete pass-through with no damage to the arrow, but the lighted knock sheared off. In summary, I've been pretty impressed with these arrows so far. While expensive, they have reduced wind drift, seem to increase penetration through bone, and have been durable in actual hunting situations. The only arrow I've broken so far was after the second deer hit the ground and rolled over it, which is something that would break any arrow on the market. I hope this video review was helpful. Thanks for watching and subscribe to my channel.